Boy, oh boy, just as I said last week and even the week before, that this was the dead period of the NFL cycle and we'll begin to ramp up in mid-July. Well, it's already happened because a couple massive stories breaking, one of which basically proves NFL collusion to not offer guaranteed contracts, which we're certainly going to discuss in this episode. But then yesterday, some massive news dropped with a bombshell trade between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Miami Dolphins.
Huge trade.
Massive. Honestly, Mark, this might be one of the bigger trades. I'm not even trying to be hyperbolic about it in NFL history when you consider the players included and the fact that it's a player for player trade that we rarely ever see.
Yeah.
Minkah Fitzpatrick, all pro safety, 28 in his prime, or you could argue maybe coming just out of his prime, traded to the Miami Dolphins in exchange for all pro cornerback, 30-year-old Jalen Ramsey, and Jonnu Smith, the tight end coming off of his best career year, them being sent to the Pittsburgh Steelers. A pretty big trade, all things considered, when you talk about 3 starters being included in this, 2 of which being all pros, and one who was a top 5 tight end last year in terms of production in the receiving game. Very, very interesting trade. The Steelers do send a 5th-round pick as well in 2027, get a 2027 7th-round pick in return. But, of course, the headliners are the players in this deal. And very interesting that they are basically swapping situations where they are filling a need and then creating a need because of who they're sending in return. So, this one floored me. We can start with that. Your reaction to that trade and the news coming out yesterday.
Well, my instant reaction was for Miami. I think they got the best player involved in this trade. And I also think they got someone who is going to fit in their culture without causing any sort of issues. One of the problems you have if you're a football coach in Miami, if you're a GM in Miami, you're in Miami. I mean, it's like being in Las Vegas. This is a really hard town to make sure you have guys who are kind of all in on the football. And Minkah Fitzpatrick is that guy. He is an all in on the football type of guy. Whereas we've seen from Tyreek Hill and Jalen Ramsey, the star power, the allure of Miami can sometimes distract you from being all in on football. And so for Miami, listen, they give up Smith, the tight end. I don't think they love having to do that, but they have weapons on offense. Offense isn't necessarily the problem. Jalen Ramsey certainly is not who he was 3 years ago, even maybe 2 years ago. And you get to basically reset the clock to 2 years of really, really high production from a very, very good player in Minkah Fitzpatrick. So I like it a lot for Miami, culturally, player. And then if I'm Pittsburgh, I get the Jonnu Smith move because Arthur Smith, it seems like that's just his guy. Like he loves Jonnu Smith like Aaron Rodgers loves, Devontae Adams or like Randall Cobb. Like it's just like I have a guy and that's my guy.
Yeah.
But I also think that is such a necessary move if Arthur Smith's going to try and convince Aaron to play within the system and make all this work really quickly and all in for 1 year. And then you add Jalen Ramsey to a defensive secondary that, Dan, I don't know if they needed the help at corner so much, but now they are easily one of the best cornerback rooms in all of football.
Yeah, and that's, the big thing is for several years, for the longest time, actually, they have struggled in the cornerback room department. And now that Joey Porter Jr. was drafted, several years ago and has proven to be one of the better shutdown corners in the league, they really just needed a quality number 2. Now they got that for a year out of Dante Jackson last year, surprisingly so. But then they go and trade for Darius Slay to fill that gap this year. I mean, talk about old player. He's one of the oldest players in the league. And you wonder if he's going to be able to actually, play for an entire 17 game slate and be that reliable second outside corner. So I think they had a need there. The question is, what do you now do about safety? Now the the good thing about the trade for Jalen Ramsey is they did get a guy that is extremely versatile. They could do a lot with Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah.
He can play safety, and maybe that's where they envision him moving at the back portion of his career, the final couple of years. I think he'll be a corner this year for sure for them, but I think they liked the flexibility that he provides with where they could fit him within this offense. And they desperately needed a slot capable corner, just one that they haven't had basically since they traded away Mike Hilton to or lost Mike Hilton via free agency to the Bengals. I believe it was 2018. So it definitely fills a gap. And I do think that they get much better. I think, Mark, what this signaled is that there's either something that wasn't working with Minka, because it's very hard to sell trading away your best locker room guy or one of your top locker room guys, one of the better safeties in the NFL, and younger than Jalen Ramsey by a couple years. It's hard to sell that unless there was something happening where he was no longer a fit for what Tomlin wanted to do. And maybe part of it is, hey, what we've done just hasn't been working. And part of that was that back 5 games of the season where they got torched defensively. Now, granted, the majority of that was through the run game, but I think they're going to maybe try and switch back to a cover 2 style defense in which that suits Jalen Ramsey's skill set much more. And, Minka was that roamer single high safety guy to kind of play center field. Maybe they're going to move away from that because they feel that they need to change their defensive, scheme a little bit. So that makes sense from that aspect. But I do think, Mark, the thing that ties this in for me and makes me get it, even though I'm not entirely sold on the move, to be quite honest with you, but what makes me get it is the Jonnu Smith portion. I think the fact that you get an all-pro corner is great. You could say maybe it's a slight downgrade, age, locker room, whatever. But Jonnu Smith being added, now you have a legitimate 1-2 tight end room of Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth that really make it clear what this Arthur Smith scheme is going to be and
12
how
personnel.
And how they're going to help Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
It's going to be run heavy. They're going to be able to run how they want to run as opposed to what they did last year. And yeah, they can run 12 personnel while still kind of being 11 personnel because Jonnu and Pat Freiermuth also can double as, pseudo receivers in this game. So I'm fascinated to see how that plays out. I think I get it. I think I'm on board, but I wasn't like, oh, hell yeah, let's go. We got Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith. I was more like, really? I didn't have Minkah Fitzpatrick being traded on my bingo card at all this offseason. So that did surprise me. I will say they've got to extend TJ now because it's going to be really hard for the fan base to get on board with trading both Minkah Fitzpatrick and TJ Watt in a single offseason. So hopefully, and signs are pointing in that direction, but they got to get that deal done soon.
That was my next little thing to end on. It is like now all roads point to TJ. I think it puts also pressure on TJ to show, hey, listen, dude, we're going all in, and we need you to be all in with us. But in order to go all in and try to win here now, that means you can't just have the earth, the moon, and the sun. And so if you want to be a part of a winning culture in Pittsburgh and try to do something special in 1 year, and then also carry that over and be a person who only plays with one franchise, which always helps your legacy and always helps your Hall of Fame status if you're a one franchise player. And if you could go out with getting a title because you're going to have a really special year. I think the pressure's on TJ to take a little bit off the top and get into camp, get signed up, locked up, and go wreak havoc, because this defense needs TJ Watt to function for all those corners in the back end.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say about the Jalen Ramsey edition is, this also signals to me too that, hey, we realize that we are just playing against fierce competition. Wide receivers are there's an influx of them in the league.
Yeah.
Every team now seemingly has two very, very, high quality, capable receivers. One is in our division with Chase and Higgins. Like we need to match that head on. And while Minka is a part of covering the back end, it's not the same as having corners lined up
Totally.
opposite of these
Corners
guys.
are more important than
They
safeties.
are
An elite corner is more important than an elite
harder
safety.
to come by. Yeah.
But
The question is Jalen still elite? And he's played super well the past 2 years. To your point, not the prime Jalen, but
yeah.
he's still been among the best in the league.
I think I think it just depends on what kind of Jalen you get. Is this a
Yeah.
Jalen who's going to look in the mirror and go, "Hey, I just got traded to be a part of something, try to be a part of something really special really quickly here. So if I can go all in for at least 1 year, maybe I can be a part of something that, nets me another Super Bowl ring like I got in Los Angeles
Yeah.
And ends my career on a really high note, as opposed to sometimes those star corners end on such a flat, kind of sad note. He's been on so many teams now. This is his fourth NFL team. A chance to bookend it with another Super Bowl, I think, would be huge for his legacy as a corner, especially if he's a huge contributor for this team, which I think he will be. Because again, Darius Slay is very, very, very old, and he's still playing at a quality level, but old.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's pretty clear that Pittsburgh is considering this we're turning over every stone to try and make changes and get this done. So it's an urgent move from Omar Khan, and we'll see if it pays off. It's certainly bold. All right, let's go into that other item of news, a kind of a bombshell report that still has been relatively absent from the overall media that covers the NFL. Pablo Torre finds out, we've referenced him on the show just about a month or so ago, as we kind of joked that he had that bombshell report about Bill Belichick and his relationship and all of that. But Pablo has come out with some pretty significant investigative reporting here. Just about a week ago, Pablo broke on his show, Pablo Torre Finds Out. I will direct you all to go watch the hour-plus long video he did on there with PFT's Mike Florio, because it's going to dive into way more details than we're able to touch on here. But in a nutshell, Pablo Torre was able to get his hands on a document that's been extremely elusive and hard to get a hold of. A document that resulted from an arbitration hearing between the NFLPA and the NFL in relation to guaranteed contracts. And the NFLPA was wanting to push, of course, for their players to get guaranteed contracts. So far, Deshaun Watson is the only fully guaranteed, all money guaranteed contract that the NFL has. And so, as Pablo Torre reported, this all started back in 2022 when that contract for Deshaun Watson came through. The NFLPA, or I'm sorry, the NFL Management Council, which I didn't know existed until this report, but it is a council made up of several independent members who work on the NFL's behalf to then, which is kind of an ironic statement in and of itself.
Yeah, right.
They go to present at the NFL's owners meeting, and essentially this closed door meeting entailed the NFL Management Council instructing the owners of the NFL on how dangerous of a precedent guaranteed contracts could set, what kind of implications this could have on their business, and strongly encouraging, if not mandating, that NFL teams fall in line and take this advice, very strongly, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, to not make this a new precedent, despite the Haslams doing so with that contract with Deshaun Watson. And so years later, then we have this arbitration hearing, pushing for more guaranteed contracts. And within this document contains a lot of stuff. But, one of which being clear text messages and communications between Dean Spanos, the Chargers owner, and the Cardinals owner, after they signed Kyler Murray to their contract, and Dean Spanos was basically congratulating the Cardinals owner, whose name slips in my mind currently, on getting such a great contract done, and how this is going to be great because it doesn't have that many guarantees in it. And, you know, thanking him that it's going to make it easier for when they do a deal for Justin Herbert. And it was basically just a pat on the back. Congratulations on getting a deal done that's great for the owners. That was just one piece of evidence within these documents that pointed to this not just being a suggestion and a advice from the NFL, but more so a mandate to follow along and make sure that all of the owners are in cohesive understanding that this is something that we all need to fall behind and get behind and do. That was just one bit of communications that they put out there that Pablo revealed. But also on the flip side, you'd wonder, okay, so the arbiter basically said in this document that yes, the NFL Management Council essentially did provide, collusive mandates to instruct the owners to follow suit and do this, but we can't really prove that the owners acted on that just because the outcomes seem to suggest that's the case. And so this case did end up getting thrown out in favor of the NFL. But the arbiter admitting that was quite a bombshell in and of itself. But you'd wonder why the NFLPA didn't want that information out and didn't leak it and didn't push for it. Well, it turns out it's because the former NFLPA president, J.C. Tretter, was caught in these documents as well as part of discovery, saying some pretty rough things about the players, calling them losers, including Russell Wilson, because, he didn't push hard enough, and basically blaming the players for not doing their part in getting a guaranteed contract. And so the owners are saying, hey, look, it's not us that's not getting them the guaranteed contract. It's clearly the players not pushing hard enough for it, as evidenced by the NFLPA president. But on top of that, he was in the middle of being ousted in 2022, created new rules that basically allowed for the panel that votes on the executive director to not actually be able to vet those directors. And so JC then supposedly had his guy come in, win the election, and then that guy appointed JC to a high up position. So there's a quid pro quo element to all of this. A lot of shadiness, very hard to dive into. And sorry for that long-winded introduction.
Hey,
but
it's a lot. It's a good overview of what Pablo Torre and Mike Florio talk about for an hour and 15 minutes plus. It's great. It's a great listen. I highly recommend you check it out. I got lost in the sauce a couple times, had to pause and rewind. And it's not one of those you can just listen and be doing the dishes or whatever. You got to really pay attention to it because it's a lot of names that you kind of know, and then it's a lot of legal jargon. And Mike Florio, obviously being a former lawyer, he eats this stuff up. And Pablo's a very smart guy who can mentally, handle the load of the difficult load that this is.
And he's poured through. It's a 61-page document. He's poured through it all.
To me, I think the things that are shocking, like the cliff notes of it, would be wild that the NFLPA is basically being led kind of corruptly at the top. That's frustrating. If I was a player, I'd be like, okay, I really want to look into the NFLPA president and Trotter and be like, maybe we need to clean house. What happened here, right? That's obviously not a good.
And just as an important aside, real quick, that executive director that was appointed was the former CFO of Booz Allen and was caught up in a massive fraud scheme. There were a couple whistleblowers involved. He magically disappeared and now emerged as the head of the NFLPA.
There's that. Number one is kind of shocking. And when you see the text messages, you see the language used, you're like, Jesus, these are the guys that are representing us as the players. That, if I was a player, I'd be really frustrated about. Yeah. As fans, this doesn't really matter to us at all. As a fan of football, this story doesn't really impact us, except for the fact that, if you want one of your guys to get a guaranteed deal, it just looks like it's never going to happen. And one of the other things, the main parts, is that kind of committee that the NFL has that then would speak to the owners, that in itself is very collusion-y. Just
Yeah.
as Mike Florio said, the fact that that even exists, I think he's spot on. It's really, really weird because it's like the owners are the NFL. The NFL
Right.
is just a collection of the 32 ownership groups.
Yeah,
And
and they
all of
are the
them,
boss of Roger Goodell, you
yes,
know?
and all of them just agreeing that this organization works the way it does and teams will play each other and there will be a Super Bowl, right? Like they just all kind of agree to it. So the fact that then the NFL organization, without the approval of the owners, set up their own little thing to basically tell themselves, hey, just because that crazy guy in Cleveland decided to do something really dumb doesn't mean you all should have to do something really dumb. And it sounds like that kind of meeting behind closed doors where they laid the dangers of the fully guaranteed contract out. It sounds like basically they just set up like a doomsday scenario for all these owners. And, you got a bunch of old guys and wealthy people clutching their pearls going like, we already don't like you, Cleveland. And now you're messing maybe with my money and my stability and my family and my wealth and all this stuff. And if you remember, since that Deshaun contract, we've gotten some big deals. But again, the guarantee money, we always say, cut through whatever Adam Schefter tweets out. Look at the guarantee. That's what this contract really is.
Yeah.
That's how we knew Kirk Cousins is really a 2-year deal. It's not a 4-year deal because look at what the guarantees really are. It's the only sport that you talk like that about. You don't talk like that with the NBA contracts. You don't talk about that with baseball contracts or even hockey contracts. At least I don't think we do because I don't cover the NHL as closely as that. So overall, I would say as a fan, it doesn't really impact you. If you're a player, you've got to be really frustrated this morning saying like, what is going on with our leadership? Why is it appear as though there's collusion within our own players association and there's quid pro quo going on and there's bad leadership that may be costing us money and you're about to go into some big negotiations with an 18 game on the table coming up here. Like you want to get your ducks in a row if you're the NFLPA, and it looks like they're bailing out water right now. That's a bad sign for the players. And if you're the owners, even though this is broken, like in the stories now out there, I don't think it doesn't make the owners, it doesn't change my opinion on them at all. We all knew when Jimmy Haslick gave that guaranteed deal, all the other owners, like we talked about day one, are looking around going, well, we're not doing that. They're dumb. We're not dumb.
Yeah.
But now that we have proof that it really did happen and they really did tell each other that, it certainly is. It's certainly eye-opening look at the league itself. But as far as importance to us as fans who want to watch football, I don't think
it's not really as impactful.
There's it's not like there's an owner who comes off in this like a Donald Sterling where it's like, oh my God, did you see what so-and-so said? Oh, racist remarks, whatever. Now, like the fans of that team are going to have to like, oh my God, they're going to have to sell the team. There's nothing bombshell like that. No owners going to have to sell the team. No one's going to pay any sort of fines or have a suspension. Honestly, the main thing that should come of this is that the NFL players need to, check your own, there's a rooster in the hen house, it seems like, at the top of your organization, and you need to figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it borders on, as a true crime fan and someone who's watched many, many documentaries on like appeals and wrongful convictions, things like that. This would fall under the, ineffective assistance of counsel.
There you go.
Argument, because they're saying, look at all this evidence that was presented and you didn't make us aware of this, because the NFLPA has not made the players aware of this arbitration result. None of the players had seen this 61-page document.
Lamar Jackson has no idea his text messages are in this document.
Correct.
Yeah, and that again, it just goes to show what is going on with the leadership of the NFLPA.
Yep, 100%. And as you pointed out, like, this isn't something that is going to surprise a lot of people, because a lot of people did expect that owners were kind of colluding. But to your point again, the fact that there's proof of it, that does matter. That does change things. And perhaps, if nothing else, the NFLPA will have to answer for this, at some point, because the agents are now aware. The agents are going to be pushing for a lot of things. They've seen this
Oh yeah.
information at this point.
If I'm an agent, I'm pissed, and I'm talking to my
Yeah.
players today and trying to figure out what we can do.
And it is amazing that, outside of a quick blurb that came much, much later, the ESPNs, the NBCs, a lot of these big companies that cover the league are not really talking about this story at
They
all.
don't want to
And
ruffle
that's
the
pretty
feathers.
clear why.
Yeah,
They
they
don't
don't
want
want
to
to
rock the
ruffle.
boat
Yeah,
and bite the hand that feeds them. But and that's why what Pablo Torre and so many others in the space are doing is important,
yeah,
because they are removed from that type of strings attached
yeah.
type of deal.
It's cool. The football media landscape is reflecting a lot of the national media landscape now,
In many
where it's
ways,
like,
it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
you still may go to your Fox News or your CNN, aka ESPN, but also when I watch ESPN, like whether NBA, finals coverage, I know that I'm not getting the best information from Stephen A. and Perk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can
More
sit there and
entertainment value.
I can sit there and digest it and be like, okay, just like I could sit there and digest a CNN or a Fox News or insert name here and be like, okay, I have to take that with a grain of salt. And then you have people like Pablo Torre who are doing the real independent kind of journalism that you see some people in the real world media doing, that, a lot of people that kind of both sides of the aisle trust certain
Yeah.
independent different journalists better, who frankly, because of the money you can make by getting numbers on YouTube or whatever, you're not beholden to a boss. So you don't have to worry about, well, you can't attack the drug companies because the drug companies buy the commercials and on our airwaves.
Right.
Like it
Exactly.
really,
Yeah.
it's one great thing that this kind of social media landscape has created. You're seeing it here now kind of unfold in the sports world with what Pablo Torre, and for a larger degree, Melissa, Mike Florio's been doing this for years. He's
He
been a
has. Yeah.
thorn in the side of the NFL on these weird out there legal stories for 2 decades now, and he's one of the best at doing it. And seeing him and Pablo work together on this was cool. So highly recommend checking out the interview.
Yeah, very cool video, and Pablo's been making the rounds as well. He says he has proof that the NFL is tracking his media appearances as well, so that'll be interesting to see
That's
whenever
awesome.
he puts that out there. But that is funny. All right, well, before we get into our top 5 and bottom 5 NFL teams going into 2025, I do want to mention the Toys for Tots League
Yeah.
at For Frequency's Sake, the podcast network here. Is available for sign up. Go to the For Frequency's Sake Facebook page. You'll find the pinned post, and you can sign up for the league. We are closing in on reaching the halfway mark of what we did last year already, before the fantasy football season's even really kicking off. So that's great to see. We're hoping to get those numbers even higher than we did last year, and continue to contribute to a great cause with Toys for Tots. All of the proceeds going to local Toys for Tots chapters throughout our podcast network, and of course the winners will get to compete for certain prizes throughout, and you'll get to compete against Mark and yours truly. So go over there to the For Frequency's Sake Facebook page and sign up today. All right, Mark. Top 5 NFL teams, bottom 5 NFL teams. This is kind of culminating in the finale of our top 5 and bottom 5 lists. We've done running backs, wide receiver ones. We've done. Did we do tight ends? Actually, I don't know if we did tight ends. We did
Coaches and
quarterbacks.
quarterbacks. We
did
didn't
coaches.
go tight ends.
We didn't go tight ends, but that's all right. We are here with the teams, power rankings, if you will. Top 5 was really easy for me.
Yeah, the bottom 5 was harder. It was much harder than I expected, because I don't know about you, Dan, but a lot of what I've been doing with this series is also kind of projecting out. Like, I'm looking at these teams. I was trying to think of bottom, like who are going to be the teams that end up, maybe picking in that top 5.
Yeah.
And that's always hard to predict, because one team that we predict as a team that's going to compete for a division is going to have a bad year. They're going to get an injury somewhere. They're going to have an implosion, and there's going to be a good team, a team that expects to compete for a division or win a playoff game that's going to end up picking in the top 5. It's just the way the NFL works. It's going to happen. So I didn't try to predict that per se, but I think overall the bottom 5 was harder than the top 5.
It really was. It really was. So let's start with the top 5. We can kind of get that rolling and we can alternate if you want, or
Sure, go for it. Why don't you start it off?
Yeah. Number one, I think they deserve this, and got to give credit where credit's due. I think the Philadelphia Eagles should be number 1 going into the season. Not much changed. I feel like they even got better. They are the most well-rounded team in the NFL. They just destroyed the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I think they deserve to be in that top spot until they, fall on their face and are proven otherwise. They've just got a lot going for them, and the trenches are really where it counts. They've got the best O-line, D-line combo in the NFL, bar none. And so, barring an injury, they are right now a loaded roster, and then not just a loaded roster in names, but they actually have lived up to it and, got over that hump and won the Super Bowl in very convincing fashion. So they come in number 1.
Yeah, they have the best running back in the league. They have a top 5 wide receiver in the league. They have a top 5 wide receiver duo in the league. They have the best offensive line in football. They, again, in the trenches on defensive line, there's no one that compares. And they have a solid linebacking core and the best defensive coordinator in football in Vic Fangio, maybe up there with Brian Flores, you could argue, but those are 1 and 1A, however you want to put them. I have the Philadelphia Eagles at 1 as well. Jalen Hurts, a top 10 quarterback. And so I think the only question mark I have with Philadelphia is after their Super Bowl run when they lost, they ended the season really poorly. Remember, they were like 10-0 or 11-0, and then they absolutely pittered out. I wonder what kind of hangover will be for Philadelphia, especially for Jalen Hurts, for I think now the 7th or 8th year in a row, going back to college, a different offensive coordinator.
Right.
We'll see if that ever adds up, or if they're smart in Philly and they just continue to let him shine the way he is supposed to shine with a complementary passing game to his really great use of his legs and the incredible Saquon Barkley. I agree. I think the Eagles overall right now, while I have some questions at the offensive coordinator and head coach, I don't have any questions on the roster that are major concerns. A couple of things, but they've drafted well. Howie Roseman, maybe the best GM in football. And so, yeah, Philadelphia is going to earn that number 1 spot for sure.
Who comes in at number 2? We'll go. We'll do like a snake.
Yeah, I go with Kansas City. So again, I'm just basing it off of the fact that I have the best coach in football, the best quarterback in football. I have an above average offensive line, an okay offensive line. You have a defense that still has a lot of teeth to it. It's a very good Chiefs defense, a really great coordinator. Spags, probably the third or the other guy who belongs in the Vic Fangio, Brian Flores conversation for best defensive coordinator. And they still have Chris Jones, who is not the best defensive player in football, but on any given night, he can be still an absolute game wrecker defensively. I like what I've seen from Travis Kelce this offseason. I think he looks lighter.
Lean,
I think he looks lean. I think he's going to come back really motivated. We know that they're getting Rice back. We know that Xavier Worthy's, going into year 2. I think Patrick Mahomes is to me the absolute X factor. I think he's poised to have a really, really big year. When Patrick lost the Super Bowl the last time, you saw how he responded. I think we're going to see a lot of that same type of Patrick Mahomes, a very motivated Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. Best quarterback, best coach. That alone should get you into this top 5. It gets them at number 2 because there are enough good complementary pieces around. And with Spagnuolo, that I feel like this is a well-rounded team, still the best team in the AFC.
I agree. Yeah, Chiefs come in at number 2 for me as well. And I will, point out on top of it that the Chiefs offense definitely had moments last year where you really were questioning, is this offense really starting to fall apart? But you got to remember, quite a few injuries they went through. No Rashee Rice. Hollywood Brown only played a couple games.
Pacheco was out for a large
Yeah,
portion of the season.
these are all players that are coming back. So really, their receiver core, while they don't have a one stud player, they now have between Worthy, Brown, and Rice a really good trio of like number two
With
receivers,
Kelsey and
right?
Gray, two good
And
tight ends.
absolutely. And then pair Pacheco in the backfield there. This offense will be coming into the season, full head of steam. So I think after the first month of the season, we could start to judge whether this offense is going to look just like it did last year, or whether they are, more of a formidable unit once again. And of course, as you mentioned, the X factor, Patrick Mahomes, is the reason that the Chiefs stay here at number 2. Number 3 for me is the Buffalo Bills. This is largely Josh Allen. But it's also just, the Bills have been hanging around. This was hard. I knew I had to put them in the top 5. Where in the top 5 was tough. I settled on 3 because I do think Josh Allen is just that good. I think he's the second best quarterback in the NFL. And because of that, it's hard for me ever to go into a season, really counting out the Buffalo Bills. I did a couple years back and I regretted it thoroughly. And part of that was I was just, had the questions, have we seen the best of Buffalo? To my credit from back then, we still haven't seen Buffalo get over that hump, right?
True.
So they still have not, convinced us that they can get to the Super Bowl. But hey, the third best team in the league doesn't make the Super Bowl if you're counting it that way. We've got Eagles, Chiefs. That's a Super Bowl right there. Buffalo being on the outside looking in. I think once again, they could be in a similar situation. Now, they did beef up the defensive line. They got Joey Bosa there, Larry Ogunjobi. Like, they've got a little bit more reinforcements there. So I do feel like they've improved as a team. I just still have question marks about the wide receiver core. I have question marks about, the weapons outside of, James Cook and Dalton Kincaid. So that will have yet to be seen. But so far, Josh Allen has proved he can put on that MVP cape regardless of, who he's working with. And so, yeah, I got Buffalo there at 3. I imagine maybe this is where we part a little bit.
We do differ here,
Okay.
and I'm going with the Baltimore Ravens at 3. I get the two-time MVP and who was second in MVP voting last year in Lamar Jackson. I get the second best running back in football in Derrick Henry. I have a better offensive line in Baltimore than I do in Buffalo. I have a better wide receiver core overall, I think, in Baltimore than I do in Buffalo. I have tight ends that I think, again, comparable, if not slightly edge to Baltimore with Likely and Mark Andrews. I have a defense that is, I think, better than Buffalo's. The back end of the Ravens defense now with the trades is scary good. And then I get a better head coach in John Harbaugh than I do in Sean McDermott. And so I like all of those things that stack up to me to make the Ravens a better overall team than Buffalo. Now, does that mean that they are going to have more success in the playoffs? I don't know. I just think right now on paper, everything to me gives a slight edge to Baltimore over Buffalo. I will say I have Buffalo at number 4. So not a drastic difference. Yeah. I'm with you right there. A lot of it's Josh Allen. I think the wide receiver core is slightly underrated. I think that Keon Coleman, Shakir, I think you're going to see the young group mature a little bit. Obviously, Dalton Kincaid and Cook are very good weapons. I think Buffalo's offensive line is improving. I agree that their defense has improved. Bosa is one of those sneaky ads that, like, week 1, you're going to be like, wait a minute, Bosa's on the Bills? He just got a sack? And you're like, oh, that's right. So there's some sneaky good stuff there. And obviously, they have been consistently good. They've won their division, 5 years in a row now, going on 6. And Josh Allen's the MVP. I think they belong in the top 5 as well. I think there is a clear, though, I think there's a clear separation between 3 and 4. It's not gigantic gap, but I think there's a clear separation, Baltimore and Buffalo. But again, maybe the reason why you like the Bills more is because of Josh Allen. I'm not going to fight you too hard on that.
Yeah.
I will argue that Lamar is the two-time MVP and was pretty much like 5 votes away from winning it for a third time last year. So I don't think the writers and the media think there's that big of a separation between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. I don't think there's that big of a separation between them either. And so all of that said, and then with obviously Harbaugh, the X factor, the ownership, the GM, I think the Baltimore Ravens from top to bottom as a football team and organization, going to be at 3, Buffalo's at 4. So where do you go for 4?
This probably wasn't a fair assessment on my part either, because I certainly could be moved and persuaded on the Ravens. I have them at 4 as well.
Okay.
I think the big thing probably for me that I was factoring in that maybe I shouldn't have is just that Buffalo plays in the AFC East and Baltimore plays in the AFC North.
That's true. That's
Baltimore
huge.
plays in a division that cannibalizes itself much more. And so I feel like maybe the path there for the Bills to be a better team next year is a little bit easier. But that being said, Baltimore, it's hard to argue that Baltimore isn't a better team in terms of a unit head-to-head matchup for sure. So yeah, I would agree with you there. Number 5 for me to round out is the Detroit Lions. While there are a lot of question marks with this team, I really struggle with counting them out with Dan Campbell, with the way Jared Goff is running that offense with Amon-Ra St. Brown, 2 amazing running backs, and a defense that had 12 players injured last year. Coming back, I think this defense is ready to attack it once again. Now they lost their defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator. Those are massive, massive question marks. But I'm still going to go into the year trusting the Dan Campbell process, trusting the players on the field. And hey, they're still an extremely talented group. And while, yes, they had those offensive and defensive coordinators last year, they still, as a team, as players, as a Dan Campbell-led group, overcame injuries that I don't think we've ever seen a team overcome en route to, almost making it to the Super Bowl like they did. So I'm going to trust that. And the fact that, they did make improvements along their offensive line, really, invested in it early in the draft this year. So I'm going to trust that and hope for the best.
So I have Detroit at 6. I think there's one team that belongs slightly ahead of Detroit. And I think I'm splitting hairs, but I'm going to give the nod at number 5 to the Los Angeles Rams. I think they have the better head coach. I think they have the better, more talented quarterback. I think they have the better defense overall as a unit. I
don't think so.
I think the young Jared Verse and this young Rams defense, the way they handled Philadelphia in the snow on the road, it's only getting better.
It was really good.
And they haven't had to sink giant money into it yet. Also, this is the first time in a Sean McVay offseason, and I think in like 4 years, that he hasn't lost a coordinator to a head coaching job. And so you're getting no brain drain from the Rams. With Detroit, I have a massive amount of brain drain. And so I factored that into it as well. Listen, Detroit also, the retirements along the offensive line, that's concerning. It's concerning for me a little bit. And so I'm going to go with the Rams overall as a better football team. It's hard because when you look at Detroit, they have a better tight end in Laporta. They have the better tackles in Sewell and what's his name on the left side, on the right side. And then they have,
I honestly can't remember,
wide receivers. I think they have a better wide receiver one with St. Brown, but I think the Rams have a better wide receiver core with Puka and Devontae Adams. So like it's really tough, you know what I mean? You're splitting hairs there, and I just think that when you come down to that and it's that close for me, I look at the quarterback, I look at the coach, and I just can't help but give the edge to the Rams. This Detroit team had everything laid out for them to make a Super Bowl run last year, and they got punched in the mouth by a Washington team that on paper, I don't have Washington at number 6. I don't have them maybe even 7 on this list. I think they're coming in somewhere closer to around that 10, 11 mark as the overall rosters and teams in the NFL. So that concerns me. And I know you could argue, listen, they were missing a ton of defensive starters. Yes, so they get starters back. Well, they lost their defensive coordinator, right? So like there's to me, there's just that inkling of concern. Now, if Detroit goes 14-3 and has a dominant year, would I be shocked? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I still pick them right now if you had to put a gun to my head to win the NFC North. But I think the Rams overall right now are a slightly better overall football team than Detroit.
I think that's fair. I had them at 6, so we're not too far off
Okay,
on that
good.
front. Why don't we have you kick us off with the 32nd
Yeah.
overall team?
I'll go, and then we can do snake format. So there were a couple teams here that I was very close to putting in this bottom 5, and we'll get to them at the end. I have like 5 teams listed at 27 is kind of like, think about these teams that I think there's like 5 or 6 teams that are truly like one tweaked hamstring away from like maybe the season collapsing, or one really ugly loss at home from me being like, do I trust them organizationally as a team with expectations to not fall apart? I didn't really have the guts to put them in the bottom 5 because truly what I'm looking at right now is the same thing I looked at my top 5: head coach, quarterback, and then your skill positions and trenches, right? Like, and then coordinators and overall organizational stability. And there's a reason why some of these teams I think deserve to be in the bottom 5, because historically and what they actually bring to the table right now, not a lot of those things are good. So I have the Saints at 32. I think they have the weakest starting quarterback room in the NFL. They have a completely unproven head coach. They have an organization that, besides Sean Payton and Drew Brees, has done what exactly successfully or right in the NFL? They have a city where you can be easily distracted if you're not buttoned up. And then they have some really good skill position players, and Alvin Kamara, a Cam Jordan, but those guys are vets with a capital VETS. And the young guys like a Chris Olave, who I like, I don't know if they can get them the ball consistently. So I have New Orleans at 32. Now, do I think New Orleans will be picking number 1 next year? Maybe not, because the NFC South is a weaker division. And I think, they have vets like a Kamara who could have a game where it's like they win a game, maybe they're supposed to lose, things like that. I'm not predicting them to be picking number 1 overall, but I just think overall right now, if you tell me everything I have the Saints at 32 as far as just too many question marks. Historically, not given the benefit of the doubt. So Saints at 32.
Yeah, I think the quarterback's what did it for me with the Saints. They're at 32 for me as well. It's hard, and it's, you prefaced it with, the storied organization that doesn't pick number 1 overall very often. But yeah, that being said, I mean, we've got a rookie head coach with potentially a rookie quarterback, and a rookie quarterback that wasn't, a top first round pick.
It's got Paxton Lynch written all over him.
Right. So there's just a lot of question marks at the 2 most key, positions on a team. And then you factor that with, the personnel isn't that great. They've got some good pieces like Cam Jordan, of course, Chris Olave and
Tyrann Mathieu, but he's
Kamara.
Older. It's those capital V vets.
Yeah, so it's these guys that, yes, they can, play tough and kind of keep things from going completely off the rails in any particular game. But do you trust that to not to happen every single week? I don't know. I mean, their only saving grace is that they play in a fairly easy division compared to most others. But the personnel is just in such a rough place. Now, if one of these quarterbacks somehow completely shines and surprises us, then that would be the difference. But unless that happens, I don't think there's any chance that the Saints aren't in the bottom 3 by the end of the season. And so I think the bottom team is a fairly safe bet. For me, 31, this is probably, I would imagine, going to be slightly controversial. I have the Titans because I just don't think the team is good enough. I think Cam Ward is good enough. I think he's going to have a perfectly fine rookie campaign. But in much like Caleb Williams, we saw flashes of greatness from Caleb in his rookie year, but there's a lot to overcome. Now, I'm not suggesting that the Titans have the instability of Chicago at that time. I think their head coach is better than Eberflus, for instance. But there's a lot of holes on this team, Mark, and there's a lot of offensive questions about, who are the go-to guys for Cam Ward, something that a rookie quarterback needs to lean on in these moments. I don't see it. I don't see the talent across the board. To me, this is a multi-year project for Callahan and the staff. And so I don't think expectations are to be winning the NFC South or AFC South next year. And for that reason, I do think they're going to have another down year like they did last year. Maybe win one more game. But I think also this would put them in a great position to pick 1 overall Cam Ward, 2 overall the next year, get it the left tackle of the future, or a great wide receiver if there's one coming out next year, something like that, to really turn the tides of this franchise.
So I'm gonna jump. I have the Titans as my 30 team. So I'm with you. I'm not.
Okay.
I'm with you. I'm not far off on that. I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think the one reason I give the Titans slight advantage over this next team I'm going to say is that I think there's just overall in that building right now, the vibes are so high. And the implosion factor is lower for me for the Titans because I don't think the expectations are very high, but I think there's vibes. I think there's positive vibes. And I think that, when you see, we've seen it in the AFC South, a coach and a quarterback find a little magic and boom, all of a sudden things can really get fun and exciting. And again, that division is not anything to write home about. It might be the worst division overall, pound for pound in football. So I think there's just a little more things going for them on their way. Now, I think my team at 31 is a team that I have 2024 Chicago Bears written all over them. Like, absolute implosion could happen. And it reminds me so similar. Like, okay, they drafted a young quarterback. They have a head coach who's been there. And they have guys that if you just list the names, you're like, dude, they got dudes. Like, they got some dudes. That's the New York Football Giants.
Mm-hmm.
I think the New York Football Giants are one 30-point blowout away in week 3 from firing Daboll and then losing 10 straight games. Like the Chicago Bears lost 10 straight games in the season last year. Like it could get ugly. I think it really could get ugly in New York. Now, the hard thing about putting New York this low is they do have talent. Brian Burns.
That D line is crazy.
Abdul Carter.
Lawrence,
Dexter Lawrence, Abdul Carter. Like, that defense is going to be nasty. Like, nasty, nasty, nasty. Offensively, the offensive line is not terrible. I think they have a solid offensive line, and they have neighbors. But is it Russell starting? The Jameis Winston factors, this weird vibes. And then obviously of Jackson Dart, who Brian Daboll, if he wants to save his career as the head coach of the Giants, the most important thing he can do is what Matt Nagy could not do with Justin Fields, is when it's time for Dart to go, to show the world that I'm the guy who's supposed to coach him. Matt Nagy's biggest flaw was that when Justin Fields had to go in week 2 unexpectedly, when Andy Dalton hurt his hamstring against the Browns, we were all expecting, okay, here's the Justin plays, and they've been working on this. And now Matt Nagy's going to show us, hey, guys, I'm gonna show you how awesome I am giving this amazing toy. And it was the worst performance I'd ever seen in my life from a quarterback and a head coach. And it was clearly like the moment was too big for the head coach and for the quarterback. And if you're Brian Daboll, like, that's what you have to avoid. But I don't know if I trust Jackson Dart. I don't know if Jackson Dart is a quality starting quarterback in the NFL, right? Like he could be Zach Wilson. He could be Justin Fields. Could he be CJ Stroud and like surprise us all? Bo Nix surprise us all? Possibly. But I think there's more leaning towards him being like a Zach Wilson, like you need a real special talent and you need a real focus and a real roster around him to be a quality starter. And I don't think they have that overall. And obviously, with the media in New York, the tensions, I think it is a powder keg ready to explode. I have them at 31, Titans at 30. We go to you for your 30.
Yeah, 30 for me is the Cleveland Browns.
Okay.
And the reason, so 30 for me is Cleveland Browns, 29 is the New York Football Giants. So
okay, great.
Away there. The reason I have the Browns slightly worse is because I do think the Giants are going to start Russell Wilson for the majority of the season. Or I think they like Jackson Dart. I know Dable probably wants Jackson Dart to be the eventual starting quarterback of this team, but they didn't just sign Russell Wilson for no reason. I think their plan is to stabilize, and I think it's a stabilizing year for this team. Letting Jackson Dart learn under Russell Wilson. Now, maybe Jackson Dart does end up being the starter, week 11, 12 or something like that when they feel that he's ready to go out there. But I feel like at that point, they've banked enough wins to be a little bit higher up the list. The Cleveland Browns, to me, that quarterback situation is a complete disaster. Like more of a disaster than the Giants, in my opinion, because at least Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston are the two best quarterbacks of those two teams. And so you can argue Joe Flacco maybe, but that's a tough pill to swallow. I don't even know Joe Flacco makes the team, honestly, because they're not going to cut both of the rookies. Are they going to cut Kenny Pickett, who they just traded for? And then they're not going to cut Deshaun Watson. They're not going to carry 5 quarterbacks. Joe Flacco might be on the chopping block if he's not the starter, even though
Deshaun's on IR, so they don't have to worry about him.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But they're not going to carry 4 in a game anyway. So yeah, they'll probably, put, Dylan Gabriel on the practice squad or something like that. Kenny Pickett's probably the starter going into the year, I feel like. If it's not Shedeur Sanders. It should be Joe Flacco. I'm not confident it will be. Regardless, I think it's a rough situation for Cleveland, man. And I do think that, and you spoke to the vibes with Tennessee. I feel like vibes have just never been more meh and gross than Cleveland this year, because they feel like they're sinking in mud right now because they've got this Deshaun Watson contract still looming. They don't have a high quarterback draft pick. They've got 2 rookies that I don't think anybody feels extremely confident in.
No.
So their quarterback situation is totally in flux. The roster is getting older and starting to fall apart. Their defense is really not very good outside of Myles Garrett. And yes, you've got a coach that we like and potentially a run game that could be, have a resurgence with their 2 draft picks. But there's nothing really to cling to with this team. Whereas at least I feel like in New York, you have a stable quarterback that can at least win you games in this league, and a dominant defensive front that could single-handedly win you a couple games this year too.
Yeah. I have Cleveland next. So
nice.
I'm with you. I have Cleveland at 29. So we have the same 4, just a slightly different order here, swapping them. I agree with everything you said. I think the reason I put Cleveland here is because I do believe in Myles Garrett. They do have talent with Jerry Jeudy. I think they have a running game that will be able to move the football. And we did see that Joe Flacco, when he was with Stefanski, if Flacco gets to start, was productive. And I do think Stefanski can he's like a Kevin O'Connell. He can make a Kenny Pickett or Joe Flacco productive. And when we'll see, I think the Browns are going to be my favorite watch during the preseason, because you're going to have the quarterback snaps in those 3 games are going to be really, really fun to watch. Not because any of them are going to be Hall of Famers, whatever, but it's like you want to see what the coaching staff is thinking, right? Like we'll finally get to peel back the curtain of like, okay, is it actually Shedeur, or is Shedeur the 4th string guy? Is he the one guy? You just don't know. So I'm with you. Cleveland is belonging in this bottom 5 for sure. They're a team that I think desperately, like, they need to win, but I think the best thing for them would, again, being able to get the number 1 pick and pairing Stefanski with his real quarterback of the future. The problem is, if you're Stefanski and you end up with the number 1 pick for all that losing, at one point in time, to say, I know he's won Coach of the Year twice, but man, oh man, oh man, like, can you
He hasn't won much, right?
yeah, or do you want to even stay there if you're Stefanski and you know you're capable? You get hired immediately, but the organization is just so chaotic. So I have Cleveland 29. At 28, the final team in the 5. Instead of reaching for one of these other teams I really wanted to put in the bottom 5, I'm going to stick with my gut, and my gut says, here's a team that's got a quarterback that's on his 3rd head coach. Here's a team that offensive line question marks, running game question marks, a star young wide receiver, which is great. Defensively, a bunch of question marks, and the new head coach is a guy I have extremely big question marks about and very little faith. And that's Duval, the Jags. They got to be in this for me, just purely based on all of the question marks. Now, what do the Jags have going for them? Let me spin zone it for the Jags. Brian Thomas is great. He absolutely could blossom into a top 5 wide receiver this year, depending on the year he has. I do think Trevor Lawrence will respond well to Liam Cohn's offense, what we've seen Cohn's offense be with Baker and in college and in Los Angeles. I do think that they will be able to establish some sort of running game. You saw what Cohen did with Bucky Irving in Tampa, committing to running the football. And the division is doable. It's doable. It's doable. And I do think Trevor Lawrence is beyond motivated, like beyond motivated. And so I do think he's got that going for him. But otherwise, again, the vibes are weird. I don't know if they actually have more talent than the teams I've listed before them, but they have Trevor Lawrence. And I just have to believe that this is the make or break year for Trevor Lawrence to turn it around. And I do think he will end the year having less question marks, and that will be a good thing. They still may not be a good team, but I think we will have more clarity on where Trevor Lawrence ranks among the league's quarterbacks by the end of the year.
I think they deserve to be in that spot. Certainly, they haven't proven to be able to, win consistently for sure and produce at a remotely high level. So I see ya and I hear that. I don't have them here at 28 for me. And it was tough to put this team here because I will say, like, it's a team that I consider probably being one of the most improved at the end of last year.
Okay.
But I still feel like overall they're a year away from really taking that leap. And that would be the Carolina Panthers.
All right. Okay.
I think the offense is starting to level off in terms of it's not going to be a complete disaster like it had been in years past. But this roster was stripped down a couple years back, and they are still in the process of building this up and creating something that could, be considered a consistent NFL producing team. But I do believe in Bryce Young. I think the resurgence is real, and he's going to have a decent, fine year. They're a star away on offense from really him elevating his game to the next level, I believe. We'll see if Xavier Legette actually ends up being that, but I have questions about that. And defensively, they're just okay. They're certainly not like atrocious like they had been a few years back, and they had a lot of injuries. So they're building, and I feel like 28 is honestly, it's fine. That's okay. Now next year in 2026, you got to get from like 28 to 20. You got to find a way to get yourself into that, place to show that you've got consistent growth. But I think they're a year away.
Yeah, so I had the Panthers as one of those next teams in comp. And I'll say this: one of the reasons why I didn't put the Panthers here is I think the Panthers' floor is higher than the Jags floor, the Browns floor, teams like that. I think they've done enough, and Canales at the end of the year showed me enough where it's like, okay, this feels like a competent football team. Like they feel like they can play the game of football and to not be embarrassing like it was 2 years ago for Bryce Young in Carolina, where they're benching him for Andy Dalton. I will say this. I agree with you. I think overall the roster just isn't there yet. And so it's going to be another struggle for them. And they probably need a top 10 pick. They probably need to end up in the top 10 and give Bryce Young one more year with another player, right? Like go get another guy and say, hey, can this now be a franchise, whether it's that star left tackle or whether it's another star tight end. They feel like they could use that like Colston Loveland, type of tight end, like a big, long, rangy guy over the middle. I think the other teams that would have been in consideration for me were the Colts, the Dolphins, the Jets, Atlanta, and the Cardinals. So all of those teams to me feel like they're one wrong thing away from it imploding. I don't trust Atlanta's head coach and their young quarterback. Arizona, we know how I feel about their coach. I liked the defense, but again, nothing offensively just feels like it fits right, even though they have good pieces. The Colts, they're probably starting Daniel Jones this year. That probably means they deserve to be in the bottom 5.
That's fair, yeah.
Even though I like their head coach and I like a lot of their pieces. Miami, they just made the big trade. I think the trade actually improves Miami. But again, Miami's offensive line is now worse. Tua is, again, one tweak away from everything falling apart. They're not a tough team, Miami. And the Jets, I like what the Jets have done. I think Justin Fields and Aaron Glenn and
I think it's a decent roster.
I think and that's why I couldn't put the Jets in the bottom 5 because the roster is just too good. Yeah. Will it work and will they win games? No idea. But I think the roster, just guys on paper, is too good. But you could also obviously see the Jets ending up with a top 5 pick too. But
absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, the quarterback position's a huge one. And so it's going to depend on how Justin does. But as always, a fun exercise. A lot of news and stuff to get to in this episode. So that's certainly good. We are going to be on a hiatus. Is it starting next week? Are we all starting next week? Or
I don't remember what we said.
Yeah, I can't remember either. I know the following week for sure we're not going to be recording, and perhaps the week after that. So we're going to be taking a couple weeks off. We'll get back to you on whether or not next week works. But as it stands right now, take a couple weeks off. We'll come back. Training camp will be underway. We'll have preseason stuff to talk about. We'll get into our predictions before you know it, and it's going to be the NFL season. So can't wait. Super stoked. Again, go to For Frequency's Sake Facebook page to go sign up for Toys for Tots, and we'll see you around next time.